My name is Andy Roberts. I'm an architect at Microsoft in something that we call the Microsoft Technology Center, which is we're a worldwide organization. We have about 15 centers in the US and about 45 worldwide, really focused on customers taking the next step to the cloud. My focus is data platform and AI. I've been at Microsoft about 25 years. It'll be 25 years at the end of next month. So I can kind of round up at this point, like my kid saying I'm like 10 3/4 or something. So I've seen Microsoft evolve quite a bit in the data landscape. So when I started at Microsoft, we were at SQL. We had just releasing SQL 7, just releasing Windows 2000. So you can think back, if you can remember that back that far, what everything looked like. And now I spent a lot of time talking with customers around building solutions on top of Azure OpenAI and some of the adjacent technologies. Was not able to tune in to Adam's session. Adam, I think you did a great job, starting to walk through some of the different offerings that Microsoft has. But it sounded like there were a lot of questions coming at you from a lot of different directions. So I was hoping to just spend a little time today going through some of the similar content, but then also a little bit on the Azure OpenAI side as well. But I kind of wanted to start with just what are some of the questions about Microsoft and Azure OpenAI that folks want to make sure that we cover today?
I want to know when Copilot is really going to be available.
Okay. I don't know if I can give you an actual date on that, but we do have an event coming up in November that I know that there will be a lot of announcements. Okay, you're sharing your screen. Good.
Yeah, I heard last week it was going to be tomorrow. So
I was on a webinar this morning and people are blown away by its features. It's like, so it'd be good if we can dive in as much as you can, please.
Yeah. Okay. So on the Copilot front, I can show a little bit. Some of what I have on my system is under NDA builds and things like that, so I can't get too much into the details. But once my system has GA bits on it, I'll be able to refine that a little bit on maybe a future presentation. But I will touch on a little bit on the Copilot ecosystem as well, because Copilot is a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, please.
Yep. So I see Bing Chat versus Bing.
I'd be interested in hearing more about your relationship with OpenAI and whether because I heard the other day that Microsoft has versions of OpenAI that are not the same as OpenAI's chatbots that are publicly available through their chat, whatever it's called, the GPT Plus program. I'm trying to understand what Microsoft is offering its customers and what the difference is between that and OpenAI.
Okay, that's great. That's a great question.
Andy, I'd love to hear or understand better how Microsoft can help companies embed language models into their own applications, what role it plays in different integration points there.
So kind of how to build on the foundation models?
Right, or how to build and deploy language model embedded applications.
Okay, to really build with. Oops, the pen stopped working.
So my question's around security. How is Microsoft going to secure the data?
All right, security.
Here you go, Mike. Michael.
Yeah, Mike Novak, thanks for raising your hand. What's your question? Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Steve. You sort of hit on it. I see it listed here, but I wanted to sort of refine it. The chatbot capability is in 365, it's in Bing, it's in Enterprise. To the extent you can, what's the strategy? Are there going to be 3 different lines of code that have to be maintained by 3 different teams? Or is it a case of here's the main line and you get access to version, features 1, 7, and 5, and Steve gets 1, 12, and 16? How's that?
God, I think I understand the question. What we can talk a little bit about that. Does that make sense? All right. Anything else? Tim Andrews, you have your hand up as well?
Yes, I'd also be interested in hearing about any validation you provide that addressing the hallucination problem is
Mhm.
popularly called. How can you trust the results if you need to be able to trust the results?
And yeah, how do you trust the results? Okay. We can touch on that. And Jonathan, let's to me, Jonathan and then John, and then maybe we'll dig in because I think we're getting to the point where I might be stretching 25 minutes here.
Yeah, mine's really quick. I use the Microsoft Azure just for some POCs. I use durable functions and cognitive search. I tried to use this was a while back though, early summer. I tried to use some of the OpenAI features, but at the time I had to like apply with some form and they never got back to me. So that has changed now, or anyway, you can maybe elaborate on that. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So kind of the Azure Open AI availability.
And my last question was on liability, whether it's liability around the IP embedded in the weights or the training data or, hallucinations, but especially around the IP that's already in the beast. How are you guys thinking about that?
Did you say liability or reliability?
Liability.
Liability.
So,
okay. Yep.
I mean, these math, I imagine the attorneys have just begun making claims on what's already in there. So.
Yep. Yeah, I can touch on that and some announcements we made over the past couple of weeks there.
Great.
And then we'll go to Tanya. You've been waiting patiently, so we'll take one more.
Hi, Andy. Good to see you again.
You again.
I had a chance to attend the Oracle Cloud, World Cloud conference last week, and they made an announcement of using Cohere as the way to educate the LLMs with companies' data. Which seemed very interesting. So I'm just wondering, will Microsoft have something similar where they're going to help enterprise with solutions on how to feed the foundational models with their own data?
So are they, and I don't know much about Cohere, but is that a way of adding context into prompts, or is it more of a fine-tuning type of approach?
It's taking the data from companies, from the company itself and feeding it into the foundational model without making copies of that data. So it's the conference that we went, the GAI conference in Cambridge, there was a company there called Prion that had something very similar. I don't know if you had a chance to stop at the exhibit hall there. So it's that kind of concept of, I guess, vectorizing the data and helping the foundational model now have company specific data for the employees to search.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about what our current approach is on some of that and how Copilot works under the covers, and some of this might bleed into future sessions down the road as well. But and we'll see if that's getting close to to what you were saying. But I don't know if I'll have a 100% answer on that today.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I apologize. My handwriting is not as great as Paul's Word document notes, but let me see if I can.
And Andy, while you pull that up, just say FYI, I took my notes and put them in shared Google Doc and stuck that out on the shared thing so we can have some shared.
Yeah, so I should have typed this. I was handwriting for some reason.
You're still on vacation.
Yeah, I'm still
Can your chatbot handle that, Andy? I mean, it can read OCR.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting, and it's not on. There is a Copilot for the whiteboard. So we could actually say summarize, see if it actually reads my handwriting here. This would be a good icebreaker. What happens with my handwriting? But so while that's going, since we're talking about Copilot, the Copilot availability, what I would say is, this is a completely made up. Interesting. So this is. By the way, I maybe shouldn't have shown that. I don't know if that is a public feature or not. So I hopefully I don't get in trouble for that. Copilot availability. I would stay tuned around Ignite. I don't have a date. They haven't given me a date on when things will be available. I will say a couple of things, right? So there are about 30 to 35 services labeled Copilot at Microsoft. And each Copilot is going to have a slightly different cadence, right? And is going to be ready at a different point in time. So the ones that I think are accelerating very, very rapidly are Copilot for Word, Teams, Excel, are probably the ones that, and PowerPoint. Those four or five are going to be some of the first that you're really going to see take traction. There might be some more released around that same time, but those are the four that I've seen the best results with so far, and I know have gotten a lot of traction with some of our early adopters. But you'll see them keep on rolling out. It is interesting, and the whole licensing model is there's different licensing models to license the Copilots. There's going to be a bundle of them that get licensed together around M365, but then there's other ones in Azure, there's other ones in Power BI, security, Defender, and what's interesting is the way that we're releasing the Copilots really talks into some lessons that we've learned around building applications on top of generative AI. And so if you look at like a large language model, that's a very general purpose tool, right? And you think, hey, I could just do Copilot for everything, right? When you start thinking about how I'm going to actually task that large language model to do something for a user, we have to get pretty prescriptive, right, around what the output's going to be, what types of, how we're going to take the user's natural language and turn that into a prompt that's going to make sense to the large language model to generate the appropriate output. And so at least in this initial phase, having these teams experiment and work independently and be able to iterate very, very quickly has allowed us to move to gain a lot of momentum. So I think that you'll, over time, maybe some of these will morph together into something that's a little bit more, kind of one Copilot to rule them all. But that, I don't think that's anywhere near term. I think that's, I think we're going to continue to see evolution at slightly different pace. On that same token, one other thing that we've been very clear with, we talked about it at Build this spring. We've talked about it on our blog, is we are learning as well. Microsoft is learning this, and we're learning a lot about large language models and how to use them and the tooling and how to use them effectively and cost effectively at the same time as we're building these. So we probably will make some mistakes. We'll make some missteps along the way, for sure. I mean, I know Microsoft, we never make any mistakes, but so as these things roll out, we'll see things iterate pretty quickly. You'll see releases iterate pretty quickly. What I might recommend is in a future session, maybe next month or maybe closer to Build, I could come back and we could do some demos around some of the Copilot functionality, as either some of it's released or I have known shareable demos, right? So a lot of my demos, because we're recording this content and posting it, I really can't share at this point in time.
Great, thank you.
Yep. So Bing Chat versus Enterprise Bing Chat. I know that. So Bing. So let's go back. Let's skip this one for a second and just talk about our relationship with OpenAI, and then we'll kind of go back to the Bing Chat. So Microsoft, made an investment of what was it, $10 billion in OpenAI. That gave us gave us some provisions, right? So we're basically, what we said was OpenAI is going to train their models on the Azure cloud, right? So that gave them the ability to train the models on the Azure cloud. We built up a really incredible ecosystem to build those models. There's a talk by Mark Russinovich at Build. If anyone's interested, I can find a link for that. That talks about what we build inside of Azure to allow them to build their LLMs in an efficient way. So, and OpenAI will only host their models inside of Azure, right? So that's part of that partnership. The other part of the partnership is that Microsoft will have an instance of the OpenAI large language models, right? And we're going to host those in Azure and allow customers to use those. Now the question was kind of, hey, what about the bot, right? So the bot itself, like, so if you look at ChatGPT and you look at what we have in Azure just out of the box, there really is no chatbot in Azure, right? For OpenAI. There's we call it playground interface, but it's not the same as like the ChatGPT chatbot. And what I really like to think about here is separating the application from the large language model itself. And I think that this is something that we do a lot in conversation when I see comparisons between even like Bard and ChatGPT and Bing Chat. There's services that the web application is providing, and then there's services that are being fulfilled by the large language model itself, right? And so when you're playing around and you're experimenting with some of these different technologies, think about, is this the bot framework or the web application that's performing this task, or is it the large language model? And just make sure you're comparing things, like for like. I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that make sense when I say that? I'm seeing some heads nod. So people with their videos are on or not in their head. So that's good. But again, I think that was a little bit of a point of confusion in that last session that I listened to. Now, so when we talk about the model, it is OpenAI's model, right? We don't change that, right? So they trained a model with X gajillion parameters and a bunch of weights, right, are assigned to those parameters, and we are running that same thing in Azure OpenAI. And actually, if you look at there's a model version that accompanies the model. I can show you that when I get into the Azure portal. Those model numbers, the model and version numbers will be the same between the two services. Now, there's things surrounding that model, even at the API layer, around, say, a privacy, safety, protection, right? And those are a little bit different. So we have a layer for protection against from harmful content and from violent content, things of that nature. And the way that we implement that does sometimes alter a little bit the goes in doesn't goes out of the model. And I think that you sometimes you'll see a little side effect of that when you're playing around between the Azure OpenAI APIs and the OpenAI APIs, which is a mouthful, and I apologize. I have to really slow down and make sure I got the right letters in the right place on those. But so that is a one thing that is a little different, right? When you start testing things out. Now, when we look at the other areas that we bring to this kind of this enterprise environment to run the Azure OpenAI APIs, is we put that inside of the construct of an Azure resource group, and you can put that in behind a virtual network, right? So you could actually say, I've got an application, it's going to be using this API. The only way to get to it is from my corporate network on premises or to be VPN'd in. So I know that access is being done in a safe and secure way. Data is never leaving my virtual network, et cetera. The other thing that we've done in that enterprise space is we said, you know what, your data is your data. We do not train our models, or we do not give your data to OpenAI to train their models on your data. So it is a fire and forget for the most part. So if you're using the Copilots, if you're using the Azure OpenAI APIs, if you're using the Bing Enterprise Chat, that data is fire and forget. We do behind the scenes log the data for 30 days by default. The logging of that data, the reason that we log that data is for content moderation. So to make sure that we're not releasing or we're protecting our users and we're protecting the world, I guess, from harmful content. And then the other is for crash debug analysis. If there is a problem, being able to go back. Now, as an Azure customer, if you deploy your Azure OpenAI API service, oh my gosh. So don't get me started on Microsoft naming. This goes back with me a long time. But if you deploy that service, I'm just going to say the AI service to Azure, you can essentially petition the product group, so you can enter an agreement with them that says, "Hey, I'm in a regulated industry. I've got PHI or I've got PCI data that might be sending through." Or PII data that's sending through these models. It might be sensitive. I work with a lot of healthcare customers. I work with some government agencies, and they said, you know what, Azure team, I really want to use this, but what I need to do is I need you to not log this for the 30 days that you normally do. And so that's an agreement that is done on a use case by use case basis between an enterprise customer and Microsoft. So far, so good. Okay.
Andy, this is wonderful.
Questions? Yep.
Folks, I'm taking a shared notes. I appreciate everyone. In the bottom of the shared notes, I have other questions as well, so feel free to
Okay.
add. You're doing great, Andy.
All right. So that gets us back to Bing Chat versus Enterprise Chat, Enterprise Bing Chat. So Bing Chat it's kind of the moral equivalent of ChatGPT using GPT-4 and the Bing plugin, right? That's it's not exactly that, but like if you're again creating application to application, that's kind of what it is, right? So if I go to Bing and I say who won Wimbledon, I'll do autocomplete for me because you don't want to see me type in public, and I go to chat. So this is the chat interface. That is just the Bing Chat interface. Bing Enterprise, and so this is not protected, just so you're aware, under the same privacy and transparency agreement as Bing Enterprise Chat or Copilot or the Azure OpenAI APIs. So
could I ask a question on that, please? I'm
Yep.
so sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of our large concerns is as I try to get my company to adapt more AI,
Yep.
one of the large concerns is proprietary data. So when we share, even now when we do, I used to work with Cisco, and we had our own Exchange server because we didn't want our proprietary email going on Microsoft's email servers. So that I can see that that's going to be a challenge in the future, whereas we implement Copilot, that people will have proprietary information that they don't want necessarily shared either to a knowledge base or out to the world or even to the hosting company.
Yep. So when you say share, are you thinking leave your premises at all, or are you saying for some other type of analysis or what have you?
I'm talking about that it would build a LMM, a language model that would then be shared with people outside the company. So it's not terrible if the language model is built on our data and it remains inside our company. But if all of a sudden proprietary data shows up in a language model that's just out on the internet or somewhere else, that becomes a problem.
Yep. Yeah, and that is our commitment across all of the Copilots and the Bing Chat Enterprise, right? So our commitment is that we will not do that, right?
Okay.
The free version of Bing Chat is not covered under that same privacy agreement. It's covered under the standard Bing privacy agreement, which does indicate that we could potentially use that data for some other purposes to make Bing better. But I haven't seen the evidence of us doing that with the Bing Chat data. It's not protected against as the paid models are. Dennis, does that help answer the question?
Yeah, because a big pain point we have is we might have a PDF, and I'm a product manager.
Yep.
So I might have a PDF that is speaking about the product that we're creating, and then the challenge is if I use your tool, and your tool consumes my data and then uses it to build your LMM, and then the LMM is used across the world or somewhere else, or goes back to OpenAI.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's explicitly what we're saying. We will not do. And so to think through that a little bit. Let me just go back to everyone's seen the bot, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on different things you can do and whatnot. You do see here that I've got, if I click on the Bing, that's using my the Bing chat. And actually, I think it is just because I'm signed in as my Microsoft account, it's using the Bing Enterprise Chat. If I was signed in with my Hotmail account, it would be using the traditional Bing chat. And then M365, this is the M365 Copilot experience. Now, if I look at, just run back, and I did have one quick summary slide that I was going to pull up real quick. So if I look at like the three things that I just talked about, Bing Chat Enterprise, and then any of the M365 Copilots, kind of the target audience, people doing, work, just personal work, people doing work for work, and so you can see here the commercial data protection, applies at that Bing Chat Enterprise level, and then when you look down at the Copilot side, that's when you start looking at the other M365 Enterprise Security and Compliance, connecting into the Microsoft Graph, and integration with the Microsoft apps, right? And those are those like, saying, hey, we've got, say 15 of them inside of M365, 15 different Copilots. Now,
this is absolutely beautiful. I knew you guys would do this. This is wonderful. Now, I just got to show this to my boss.
There we go. And I'll send a section of these slides over to Paul after the session, so you can share them with the group as well. So this thing here that says M365 Graph, content, and context. This is really interesting, and this plays into how we're implementing kind of that RAG, that retrieval augmented generation pattern with your data. And so if you think about M365 today, there's this thing, whether you know it or not, behind the scenes, it's called the Microsoft 365 Graph. And it kind of keeps track of everything. All the documents that are stored inside of SharePoint and OneDrive, all of your Teams chats, all of your Teams meetings. We don't keep track of the Zoom meetings, but everything inside of Azure Active Directory, organizational hierarchies, and so all of that is stored in the M365 Graph. And one of the options that we released a while back on the M365 Graph is something we call the semantic index. And the semantic index, what that allows me to do is search for content with, not just lexically, but with meaning, right? So an example of this, if I'm searching policy documents, instead of saying, does my healthcare policy covering hearing aids, maybe I'm saying, does my healthcare policy cover mechanical devices that attach to my head that aid or assist in auditory comprehension, right? And in both cases, it would find a document that like says, hey, Andy Roberts is covered for hearing aids, right? And that's what that semantic index is doing. And now, again, we're not augmenting a large language model with that data. We're using that as context into the prompt, right? That says, hey, here are some sections of documents that you should use to prompt that large language model to generate. All right. Now that question that came up does play into it. Another piece. So we talked so a little bit about this. If we think about liability, so Microsoft announced a couple weeks ago. So Brad Smith posted on LinkedIn. We have a what do we call it? Copyright. I forget the actual title of the document now, but basically, it is a. Let me just pull it up. Microsoft GPT copyright indemnification announcement. Yeah, so here's an article on, actually here's the actual announcement, I think. So the Microsoft blog. So this is the announcement that we made a couple weeks ago. What this is saying is that if you are using the Bing Chat Enterprise, or you are using Copilot branded, Microsoft Copilot branded tools, and you are sued for copyright infringement, we will aid in your legal defense, right? So it's kind of an indemnification policy. There are a couple of caveats to that. If you knowingly are using copyrighted material and then just try and produce it through Copilot, well, we're not going to protect you against that, right? If you said, hey, pull this thing from the web and just put it in my document, hey, that shame on you, right? If you are, and this covers only the Copilots and the Bing Chat Enterprise, it does not cover the Azure OpenAI service. So just be aware of that. Basically, with the Copilots, we have a very good view of what you're doing and how the tools are being used. And we feel very comfortable in making that protection. In the Azure OpenAI service, it's going to be much more difficult for us to track back to how a document was created or how an output was generated. So we're not able to offer that same level of indemnification. That's the way it was explained to me. I am not a lawyer. I do not play one on TV. I do not come to you for legal advice. But Brad Smith is he's been our chief legal counsel for quite some time, so understands this space pretty well. And now, I can't really comment on any of the, there, as people are probably aware, there are some ongoing lawsuits in this space that I cannot comment on, just for lots of reasons. Let me touch, also on, I guess, we kind of talked about this a little bit on security. So if you're in the Copilot space, it's really your M365 security, right? So that's how you're securing your documents that are used for the content creation, how you can secure the output. You're talking over, secure channels, logged in with your I was going to say Azure Active Directory, but we call it Entra now, credentials. But so all of that is how we're enabling protection, through the governance and compliance policies of M365. And the Azure OpenAI side, so that if you're using it at the API level to build your own solutions, by default, basically what you have is an endpoint and an access key, right? And that. So like if I have, Azure OpenAI, it's got an endpoint and just a key that you would build into your code. Now, probably a best practice would be to put some sort of an API like facade. So in Azure, we have something called APIM, or API Manager, or another very creative name. That what you could do is have Azure API Manager connect using that access key, right? But the API that you expose through API Manager requires Azure Active Directory login or whatever credentialing service that you're going to provide as part of your application, right? That way you don't have you're minimizing the risk of like key loss and things like that. So that's kind of securing the access to that layer, and then all of the data and all of the other stuff. That's other, again, Azure data governance policies that you would really bring to bear there, which is kind of a bigger conversation. And then, like I said, everything in here in the Azure side can be put into a virtual network, so it's an isolated environment. Not shared with networking infrastructure or the physical infrastructure here, but the software-defined networks are not shared by other constituents inside of Azure. So when we talk about hallucinations and how to build kind of with foundation models, one of the you just saw a hallucination creep into this preview of the whiteboard Copilot, so I apologize for that. We try and protect against that. If you are using just like say the Azure OpenAI API, or if you're using some of the Bing Chat without phrasing things properly, we are prone, all, these large language models are prone to hallucinations. I think as an industry, we're trying to reduce that. If I'm building an application, right, if I'm building my own application, and I'm really controlling those prompts, I can significantly reduce the hallucination problem. And I'm just going to show you an example of a prompt like that. So I'm in an environment here. Let me just go to, I'll just pull up the website and I'll say, what's included in my health plan? The standard thing here. So you'll notice right away. So one thing that I did here is I said, you'll see in my prompt, just say, hey, cite any references, and make sure you can cite references for any fact that you're putting in the response. When you do that, it's going to tie that back into something. So if I open up this PDF, you would see the actual data that made up that response. If I look at the thought process, you can see here that it says, hey, you're a chatbot. Answer only with the facts listed in the list of sources below. If there isn't any information, say you don't know. Do not generate answers that don't use the sources, right? These very simple commands significantly reduce, this is just empirically through the customers that I've been working with, reduce the hallucinations. And so enough so that I'm not seeing this used for, like, for example, used for like an actual clinical decisions, but I am seeing doctors and nurses using this to actually to do lookups, and there's still, we talk about all these solutions as co-pilots. They still have to do some verification, but by at least citing those references, they can go check, hey, instead of looking through like 20 textbooks, I can go to this one. I know it's in this chapter on that page to get to where I need to go get that answer. So that's a way, right, that we've been seeing, kind of reduction in the hallucination pattern. And this example is built on using that RAG pattern that we talk about, the retrieval augmented generation. RJ, you got a hand up?
Yeah. So regarding what you just said, I'm just wondering, why don't they put that, like they meaning Open AI, why don't they put the prompt things that you just mentioned into a system level prompt that's always working in the background, or otherwise people will have to put it in their custom instructions as a sort of their own system level prompt, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it comes into this balancing act, right, of being able to generate language and be creative, and use this as a kind of a system where I'm doing Q&A against known sources, right? So for example, if I said, hey, I have my daughter write her bedtime stories with Azure OpenAI, right? So she says, I'm a 10-year-old girl walking through the forest with my dog Lucky, and all of a sudden, make sure the goddess Athena is mentioned because she loves Athena. And so, it'll be a story about Athena dropping down and, something weird happening in the woods, and Athena saves the day. But that's not pulling from any facts, right? That's kind of making stuff up, and really taking advantage of the fact that there is kind of knowledge embedded inside the system, right? But it's all made up, right? And there's a lot of cases where you're using these large language models to be creative. Now, when I'm talking with my customers, for most of the use cases, we're data people, we're not very creative. So we're trying to solve a problem with data that we know about, right? And so what we'll do is we'll do something like vectorize a bunch of documents, stick it in a vector database, try to use like a semantic index or semantic search or vector search to pull out fragments of documents, and we'll inject that as content. And what I always tell people is, assume, like when you're giving instructions to the large language model, assume that the model has no embedded data, right? I like to think of the large language model, it was designed to generate language, right? It was not designed to be an encyclopedia, right? The fact that the large language model knows who won the 1928 World Series is like a side effect in a parlor trick in my mind. At least for the types of problems that I solve with these models, right? So use the data that you have, put that in the context and just make sure you instruct the model to always answer from that context and don't make anything up. There's a few other like little prompting tricks like that can help in that regard. But this guy goes back to like how we build applications on top of the large language model, which I think was one of the questions. This is just an example of a high level architecture diagram. This is not the most detailed. Let's see if I do have thought I had one that had a little bit more. Oh, if not, there's a GitHub repo here. Yeah. So that sample that I just showed you, including the documents from our perennial favorite Microsoft companies, Northwinds and Contoso, is right in this data. So you can actually take this this GitHub repo, and somewhere down here there's some deployment instructions. Here we go. Either through remote containers or through code spaces, you can run the code. There's CLI instructions on how to. Oh, yeah, here we go. To actually deploy into your Azure environment, and you'll have that exact same demo. You can actually substitute that out with your documents, and you're good to go, right? So now you've got a chat bot on top of your data. Now, again, going back to like, it doesn't always have to be a chat bot, right? In this case is a chat bot, but like I've been working with a customer that's looking at generating auto responses to inbox messages in their application, right? So that's more of classifying what type of question is coming in, and then generating response, right? That's not really a bot, right? But they're still using the same API calls and prompt engineering techniques that you're using through this type of teaching exam.
Andy, this is Paul. Let's take 2 more questions. I'm going to do a short open mic. This is
right.
Process, though. Fabulous.
Sounds good. And I'll say the last one that was up here that I haven't talked about was Azure OpenAI availability. To the gentleman that asked that question, I'll have to check on that. It's the last I deployed it, it was still a form that you filled out, but I think that is more broadly available at this point. So if you went into Azure and deployed that service, I think that it's available. All of my subscriptions are enabled, so I can't test it for you right now. Bob.
Andy, thank you. I have an LLM level question between Microsoft's GPT-4 implementation and OpenAI. So pretty clear that May 20th, when OpenAI launched GPT-4, they're probably similar, if not identical. My question is post-deployment, and more specifically with regard to fine-tuning and RLHF. Does Microsoft and OpenAI go their own direction in terms of the updates to the model based on those techniques? Do they stay merged? And if they diverge, what would happen theoretically if there was a version 5 that came out in 2024?
So I'm gonna get out of here. I don't know why that I'll try and launch this one more time while we're talking. Okay. All right. I see. See if this works real quick. So no, that's weird. All right. So I will not do that demo. I was going to show you a little bit about some of the other large language model support as well. But so Microsoft, like I said, there's things surrounding the large language model, kind of like in between the chatbot and the model, right? We're not doing anything to adjust weights or anything like that on the model. We're using the model as is. If you look at the underpinnings of some of the co-pilots, there are some co-pilots that have been doing some fine tuning to work effectively in that Copilot ecosystem, right? We have, and it's not always fine tuning at the. I think we do have. So anyway, we have some fine tuned models. We see it a lot for classification type of problems, where we're fine tuning. Actually, a lot of times the lower level models, right? So not ChatGPT-4, but fine tuning a lower level model. It's faster to fine tune and can work very, very efficiently at performing a specific task. When I just as you're working with LLMs and kind of what we found is there's kind of a pyramid, and it kind of looks like this, where problems that you can solve with prompt engineering, prompt fine tuning, and build your own foundation. So we found, I actually ran a hackathon for a local customer. They had 20 development teams, and 17 of those teams in the hackathon started out the 2-week hack saying, we're going to fine tune our own models. At the end of the hackathon, I think it was all but one of those 17 teams came away saying, you know what, I was able to solve this problem with prompt engineering. We actually don't need to fine tune our own model to solve that case. And we found that's kind of extends what we found inside of using those models in Microsoft as well. So there are some cases where we do, but it's infrequent. It's a very expensive. There, yeah. And one other point I was going to make there, but I forgot what it was. So
it'll come back.
It'll come back.
Yeah, it'll come back. Andy, we're going a few minutes over. Do you mind if we have a few minutes, or should we stop?
I'm fine.
Okay, let's go 5 more minutes. David, and then Steve, and then we'll wrap.
Yes, I have 2 quick questions. First, beside OpenAI model, some open source model like Microsoft Feed 1.5 or small models are into productions in Microsoft, like to integrate with the Microsoft operative system without the need of using internet?
So we are seeing, one area that we see in some of these models is using Onyx as a kind of moving, translating the models to be able to run in the Onyx runtime. Use like a huge LLM, that's going to be a pretty big Onyx model that would take forever to run on a non-GPU device. But we do see, like, we are working in some cases, we're doing a lot of work in like model distillation. So using the output of a big foundation model to kind of train a smaller model. So that's like, if, for example, Orcus, we talked about in June or July was a project along that front. We're going to see more of that coming down the road. I also think that, like, we're in a leapfrog mode right now, and we always talk about the big side of the leapfrog. So you see, like, Microsoft releases or OpenAI releases a model, then Anthropic releases a model, then Google does, and they're all trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger. At the same side, David, the side that doesn't get much attention are people trying to do more with less as well, right? So I think it was Apple that announced that that Llama 2, they had that running on the new iPhone, right? They're actually, the runtime actually embedded on the iPhone. So there's a lot of work being done in that space as well, and will be needed for services that need direct user interaction that can't be connected to the internet, right? If you're starting to rely on things in a mission critical capability, and you're in a hospital or a spotty network environment, manufacturing facilities that are in very sparsely populated areas, dangerous terrain, things like that, you don't want to have to rely. We see the edge computing all the time for deploying inferencing models for like computer vision and speech detection, things like that. So we'll see that in the large language model front as well. I don't have a definitive timeline or approach yet.
That's great. So Steve, last question. Then we'll go to Adam's quickly. After do Steve, we'll do Adam your 2 news items. Then we'll wrap. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I just had a question whether or not ChatGPT-4 is able to actually be able to create commands with the API.
When you say break commands, You mean like you're talking about like prompt injection attacks?
Not, I don't know if they call it, but I ran into somebody online who claims that he actually wrote commands that work in the ChatGPT-4 paid interface.
I guess when you say wrote commands, I don't know, I'm not sure what you mean by
Like
that.
save. I'd have to go back and look at it, but
Yeah.
I read in the documentation that's there's some controversy over that. It really can't do that.
Are you talking about like making Python commands and completing those for you?
That's possibly what he did, but I don't think he knows how to use Python. I think it's
Right,
WordPress with a plugin from ChatGPT.
Yeah, they do have some AI, some chatbots that will go in and complete. And my son uses it all the time, and it fills out some of his code for him. So code completion.
Gotcha.
On the back end, through the API, you can automate ChatGPT. If you have a series of prompts, like 20 or 30 prompts, you can say, do this one. Once completed, do the next one. Once completed, do the next one. And once you have completed all of that, the project is done. On the back end, you can say, now do it again, but modify it a little bit, and it will do it again. And you can keep it running all day long. I think that's what they're referring to.
Yeah, no, I think I know what the speaker is talking about. He's talking about custom instructions that have been packaged as macros. So basically, somebody is creating /save or /continue or whatever, and these get interpreted by the custom instructions to follow some prompting. That's what I think I saw this prompt pack somewhere.
Yeah, it's called Command Pack. That's what the developer called it.
Yeah, command pack. Yeah, it's Andy. It's just custom instructions, like packaged nicely into a macro.
Yeah, I'd have to do. I'm not well versed in that. I have to really give an answer. But if someone could post me a couple links, glad to follow up with a response on that. Yeah, and I think you will start seeing with GPT-4. Plugins as well as functions. This landscape is going to start getting more complex and more dynamic. So this is definitely an area that you need to guard against. I would say that it's not just this is another area where we need to separate the LLM from the hosting application, right? The hosting application really needs to exercise in a least privilege, do no harm mentality. It's that's up to the application developer. The LLM is just spitting out, words or tokens, right?
Andy, just absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and carving out some of your evening here. And this has really been instructive. Adam, you want to share one or two open mic or one or two news items open mic, and that'll be it. And then we'll wrap in 2 minutes. Good. Or Memphis.
Yeah, sure, Paul. Thanks. I put them also I did a page break and put them onto the end of your document as well, so they'd be captured in the meeting. But just DALL-E 3 was just announced, which looks like it's going to give Midjourney a good run for its money in terms of text to image. It also looks like you can be much more detailed and specific about exactly what you want within the image. Like, I want the man to be wearing a brown coat, and it will put a brown coat on the man in the picture. What else come out? Anthropic, as you mentioned, Paul, is getting investment from Amazon, which is huge news. And I put a link as well to an article from Connor Grennan on LinkedIn, where he goes into some of the broader landscape about the significance of that. And then also just yesterday, OpenAI announced the See, Hear, and Speak feature, which means the multimodal GPT-4 is going to be more generally available, I think, even within a couple of weeks for enterprise and GPT Plus customers. The other cool thing that came out in the last week was Google Bard has the new extension with the Google Workspace for people who aren't Microsoft ecosystem. I gave it a quick test, but you can literally go into Bard if it's connected now and say, hey, what time did Paul say we're meeting next Wednesday? And it'll go look through your emails, or it can search through your Google Drive as well. So it's starting to build more of that chat capability on top of that ecosystem as well, which is good to see.
Fabulous. Thank you again, everyone. Fabulous evening, and we'll see many of you next week. Thank you, and good morning to some of you, and good evening for the rest of you. Take care.